Have you ever found yourself alone in a crowded room? That peculiar sensation where despite being physically surrounded by others, you feel utterly disconnected, as if separated by an invisible wall that no one else seems to notice? If so, you're experiencing something profoundly human, yet something we rarely discuss openly: loneliness. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're venturing into territory that affects millions but remains shrouded in silence. Loneliness isn't just an emotional discomfort, it's increasingly recognized as a public health concern with real consequences for our physical and mental well-being. But unlike other health issues, there's often a stigma attached to admitting we're lonely, especially in our hyperconnected world where everyone appears to be thriving socially online. What makes our relationship with loneliness particularly complex is that it's not simply about being physically alone, it's about the perceived quality of our connections. You can be surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues yet feel profoundly isolated if those relationships lack depth or authenticity. Conversely, someone who spends considerable time alone may not experience loneliness at all if their occasional interactions are meaningful and fulfilling. In the next few minutes, I'll share insights about loneliness that go beyond the typical "just join a club" advice. We'll explore what loneliness actually is from a psychological perspective, why it affects us so deeply, and most importantly, nuanced approaches to addressing it that respect the complexity of human connection. I'll also discuss some counterintuitive truths about solitude that might change how you view your alone time altogether. Stay with me to the end. I'll be touching on aspects of isolation that are rarely addressed in mainstream discussions, but could fundamentally shift your perspective. Let's begin by understanding what's actually happening when we feel lonely. Loneliness isn't simply the state of being alone, it's the perceived gap between the social connections you have and the ones you desire. This distinction is crucial. Your brain processes social isolation similarly to how it processes physical pain, triggering stress responses that, when chronic, can lead to inflammation, reduced immune function, and increased risk for cardiovascular issues. This biological response makes sense evolutionarily for our ancestors. Being separated from the group meant vulnerability to predators and reduced access to resources. What's particularly insidious about loneliness is how it creates a self-reinforcing cycle. When we feel lonely, our brain goes into a threat detection mode that makes us more sensitive to potential social rejection. We become hypervigilant about how others perceive us, often misinterpreting neutral interactions as negative. This protective mechanism, ironically, can make us appear more withdrawn or even hostile, further alienating the very connections we crave. Understanding this pattern is the first step toward breaking it. The second key insight concerns the quality versus quantity debate in relationships. Studies consistently show that having a few deeply meaningful connections contributes more to emotional well-being than numerous superficial ones. This flies in the face of our culture's emphasis on expanding social networks and accumulating followers. The crucial factor is whether you feel truly seen, heard, and valued within your relationships, what psychologists call social belonging. A single authentic connection can sometimes do more to alleviate loneliness than dozens of casual acquaintances. Before I continue with more strategies for addressing loneliness, I want to take a moment to speak directly to those of you who've been following this channel. The conversations we're having here about life's deeper challenges and the human experience are only possible because of this community we're building together. If you've found value in these discussions, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. It not only helps the channel grow, but ensures you don't miss future explorations into the aspects of life we too rarely discuss openly. Your subscription makes these deeper conversations possible. Now let's get back to understanding loneliness. The third principle for addressing loneliness might seem counterintuitive: learning to be comfortable with solitude. There's a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is an unwanted state of social disconnection, while solitude is intentional alone time that can be restorative and growth-promoting. By developing a healthy relationship with being alone, finding activities that bring you joy and meaning without requiring external validation, you build emotional resilience that paradoxically makes you less vulnerable to loneliness when it occurs. Practicing mindful solitude helps calibrate your expectations about social connection. Many people feel lonely because they compare their social lives to idealized versions they see in media or on social platforms. By finding contentment in your own company, you approach relationships from a place of choice rather than desperate need, which typically leads to healthier, more balanced connections. Fourth, when actively addressing loneliness, focus on creating rather than simply consuming experiences. The digital age has made it incredibly easy to passively consume content, endless scrolling, binge watching, and vicariously living through others' experiences. While these activities can temporarily distract from loneliness, they rarely satisfy our deeper need for connection. Instead, engage in activities that involve creation or contribution, volunteer work, community projects, creative pursuits in group settings, or even organized discussions around shared interests. These contexts naturally facilitate more meaningful interactions because they are built around shared purpose rather than the connection itself being the goal. Finally, recognize that vulnerability is not weakness. It's the cornerstone of meaningful connection. The relationships that most effectively combat loneliness are those where we feel safe enough to be ourselves, including our imperfect, struggling, uncertain selves. This requires risk-taking, being willing to initiate contact, express interest in others' lives, ask for help when needed, and share your own challenges. Each vulnerable exchange creates potential for deeper connection, but it requires stepping through the fear of rejection that loneliness often amplifies. What's rarely discussed in conversations about loneliness is how cultural factors shape our experience of it. Western societies in particular have become increasingly individualistic, celebrating self-sufficiency and personal achievement while inadvertently devaluing interdependence. We structured our living arrangements, work environments, and social expectations around individual rather than collective well-being. Recognizing these structural influences can help depersonalize your experience of loneliness, understanding that it's not simply a personal failing, but partly a product of how our society is organized. This perspective shift doesn't eliminate loneliness, but can reduce the self-criticism that often accompanies it. Rather than asking, "What's wrong with me that I feel lonely?" consider, "What connections am I missing? And what small steps can I take to begin building them?" This framing acknowledges loneliness as information rather than a character flaw, a signal that a basic human need isn't being met. In closing, addressing loneliness isn't about eliminating alone time or filling every moment with social interaction. It's about cultivating connections that matter, relationships where you feel understood, valued, and able to offer the same in return. It's about recognizing that occasional feelings of isolation are universal, even necessary parts of the human experience. And perhaps most importantly, it's about approaching your social life with intention rather than allowing it to be shaped primarily by circumstance, convenience, or digital algorithms. Remember that building meaningful connection is rarely a linear process. There will be setbacks, awkward moments, and times when loneliness returns despite your best efforts. The key is persistence and self-compassion along the way. Each small step toward authentic connection matters, even when progress feels slow. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Have you found effective ways to deal with loneliness in your own life? Or perhaps you've discovered unexpected benefits in periods of solitude. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. If you found value in today's discussion, please take a moment to like this video and consider subscribing for more explorations into the aspects of human experience we too rarely discuss openly. Check the description below for additional resources to support this channel and further reading on today's topic. Until next time, remember that connection starts with being willing to be seen, imperfections and all.